the very least
Order.
give this organisation
I've indicated
that chance.
to the member that her time has expired.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker.
Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin by endorsing the remarks that Ruth Dyson has made in her contribution. Actually, I think pretty much all of them, actually, but I was particularly thinking of the ones about the excellence of the Select Committee process and how well that went. You know, Mr. Speaker, this debate and this third reading over these three bills comes on top of quite a series of contributions I've made in the debate over the previous entity, the Crown Entities Bill. And that bill and these three bills now at third reading range from the sensible and actually quite exciting through to the irredeemably stupid. And so I want to just run through some principles that might assist the House in distinguishing between them. Because it seems to me, sir, that if a government is contemplating merging Crown entities, then there are some tests, some thought experiments that perhaps should be carried out to determine whether that's a good idea or not. And first of all, I've got, and I'm sure the government members will appreciate this, is the function necessary? Is the function of this entity a necessary thing? Secondly, I've said, and again, I'm sure the government members will agree with this, is the function appropriately one for the state? Because again, that's an important test, isn't it? Thirdly, I've said, are the functions of the entities that are proposed to be merged actually congruent? So does it actually make some sort of prima facie sense to actually merge these two things? Would they work together? Fourthly, what are both the financial and non-financial benefits and disadvantages of what is proposed? Quantify them and balance them off one against the other, benefits against disadvantages. Only proceed if it has a positive balance. Makes sense, doesn't it, sir? And then finally, I suggested that the next test is how easily realised are the gains? Because, as I've said on a number of occasions on debates on the Crown Entities Bill, the fact is the experience of state sector changes over the past several decades is that it's extraordinarily difficult to realise the gains that are promised by the business case. And actually, sir, we actually haven't seen the business case for any of these mergers, so we don't even know really what's promised. But the reality is that the experience of the mergers that have taken place in the state sector over some quite considerable time is that usually the benefits are not realised, at least to the extent that is promised. So sir, there's a framework for assessing proposed changes. And we look at the first of these bills, the amendment to the Public Health and Disability Act to create this health promotion agency. And actually we can say not only is this a desirable function, it's an extremely important one. And actually it's one that this country, as the social determinants of health are eroded further and further by successive government actions, it becomes more and more necessary. So a highly important function absolutely must be carried out by the government. That's what the Ottawa Charter is all about, and the government members have talked about how important this is as a means of operationalising the Ottawa Charter. Are the functions congruent? Well, these great organisations, the Health Sponsorship Council and ALAC, who've done a fantastic job over the years, in fact do have highly congruent functions. And actually the work of each will be advantaged by being in the same pot as the other, let alone the other functions that could be added to that. And I again remind government members that I'm looking to see this agency become more and more the engine for health promotion in New Zealand. What are the financial and non-financial benefits? Well, I think there are clearly some significant efficiency gains from this particular change. It seems to me that there's very little in the way of downside. So that balance looks to me to be positive, and those gains ought to be relatively easily realised. So it's a green light on all of those aspects of my test. So then we come to the next one, the Mental Health Commission Amendment Bill. Is the function necessary? Absolutely, for the reasons that Ruth Dyson has very ably outlined tonight. Is the function appropriately one for the state? Again, absolutely. You know, the state, sir, is the planner and funder of mental health services for New Zealand. While we have made dramatic advances in particularly mental health services for those with serious mental illness as a result of the changes that the Honourable Ruth Dyson has outlined, actually there's still a long way to go with community-based mental health services, and that function must be carried out by the state. Are the functions congruent? In this case, sir, absolutely not. Absolutely not. The functions of the Mental Health Commission have been long-term planning and monitoring against that long-term plan. Now, those are very much helicopter view functions, and they are prospective functions, whereas the functions of the Health and Disability Commissioner tend instead to be very much analysing individual cases and looking at the micro situation, and usually working in retrospect. What is it we can learn from that thing that went wrong? So these are both important sets of functions, but there is no congruence between them, sir. So the marriage that is proposed by this bill is absolutely the wrong one. So the balance of benefits and disadvantages in this case, well, there's a massive disadvantage in the risk that is posed to achievement of the mission of the Mental Health Commission. Massive disadvantage. And the benefit, sir, is probably a small cost saving. Well, sir, that is not a balance that passes my test. And the reality, when you factor in on top of that the likelihood that small cost saving may well not even be achieved, or not be achieved in a realistic time frame, suggests that merger ought not to go ahead. But then finally, sir, we come to the change that I describe as the irredeemably stupid, and that is the one around the Charities Commission. So, is this function necessary? Absolutely yes. Is this function one that should be carried out by the state? Well, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because actually the whole point around the Charities Commission was to respect the separation between the state sector and the community sector, and to manage the interface between the two through an entity that was sufficiently distal from the core state to give trust and comfort to the New Zealand community sector. That's the point of the Charities Commission. So it is not appropriate for that function to be carried out in the core state service and internal affairs. Are the functions congruent? Well, again, kind of, sir. That's not really the issue in this case. What's the balance between financial and non-financial risks and benefits? Well, in this case, sir, the potential gains, potential benefits are tiny. They're immaterial. And that has to be balanced again against these huge risks around the total loss of trust from the New Zealand community sector in the interface between the state and the community sectors. Now, that is a test that this merger fails absolutely. So, sir, let's by all means look at ways of improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the state sector and look at structural changes. But, sir, only one of these proposed changes actually passes a rational set of tests, that's the only one we will support.
Kanwal Bakshi.